Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Creamsicle Chronicle podcast. My name is JT Olson. With me, as always, my co-host, Garrett Ballard. Garrett, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's a great Friday night, Friday evening for our guest here on a Mock Draft Mania episode of the podcast. Very happy to be joined by Alex Katson, someone that I think JT and I both think is one of the brighter minds in the draft space right now. He's doing a lot of great work in a lot of different areas. I'm not going to try to explain them all. I'm going to let him do that. But Alex, thanks so much for coming on. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you guys for having me. I'm doing good. Getting ready to hop on a plane and get out to Michigan for the draft itself. First time covered in person, so I'm very excited. But yeah, I'm all over the place these days. I'm doing so I'm over at USA Today with Chargers Wire, with Huskies Wire. I'm doing my own thing over on Patreon with all of my spreadsheets and all my data and everything. Help out the rest of draft media as they try to navigate like COVID eligibility and pro day data and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, just in all sorts of places. Only going to continue being in all sorts of places once the draft ends. Got a lot of cool stuff in the works, but excited to get through this class first.
Well, Alex, you really buried the lead there. Your biggest thing right now is you helped assassinate the greatest coach in NFL history. I mean, did you know you were setting Steven up to kill his father there? Or...
So I didn't ask the question. I just posted the quote. But yeah, that quote did do well. Did do numbers on Twitter with Steve, the defensive coordinator, now over with my Washington Huskies at that media luncheon. Definitely got a lot of laughs in the room, and has been fun. Like seeing Bill Belichick at practice in UW gear, and like Pete Carroll has come to practice, and John Lynch has been at practice, and it's a crazy environment right now, and so it's a really fun time to be covering the team.
Yeah. Before we move on from stuff you're doing, I'd be remiss to not mention your podcast, which JT and I think is fantastic. So I want you to talk a little bit about that if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I do a podcast with a couple of other draft Twitter people. It's called Sorry No Podcast Today. It's a little inside joke between the six of us that are all on the show. We're on a little bit of a hiatus right now. We've had some people that are like changing roles in the industry and are going through some stuff, working through some their like primary responsibilities as draft coverage folks. But we have a lot of stuff planned for 2025. That's one of the things I kind of alluded to with having more stuff coming down the pipe, and so we're really excited. We try to keep it pretty lighthearted while still like giving generally good analysis. Sometimes we get a little bit off the rails, but yeah, we have a lot of fun with it. It's like me and JP Acosta from SB Nation, and Tyler Fornes and AJ Schulte from Sporting News, and Kevin Fielder, who's over at Rivals covering K-State, and then our friend Karina, who is a Eagles fan in New York.
Yeah, and anyone who hasn't checked out the pod, you really should, because Tyler we've had on this show before. He does great work. AJ I know from way back. He does a really great job. I don't really know JP, but he's a really good read if you've awesome. Never read him. And I don't know anything about Kevin, except it seems like everyone kind of low-key hates him. But
that is the bit on the podcast. He
seems like a nice enough dude.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for something laid back, funny, but still informative, great show. Highly recommended. I think it's one of the up-and-coming podcasts out there right now. So check it out, everyone. Again.
Appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely. Of course. Fred, we saw your comment. Glad you're joining us tonight for this mock draft episode. So pretty much I'm just going to kind of throw the premise out there. We're going to talk a little bit about the draft in general to start. And then all three of us, we have a Bucs mock draft. JT and I, obviously being the Bucs fans, the guys who know a lot about the team, and then Alex, kind of an outside perspective that can maybe introduce some new names that we haven't really talked about, or bring some different perspectives to the table. That's always healthy to have when you're having these conversations. And then after that, we had some of y'all, some of the listeners, reply to a tweet we sent out earlier today with some mock drafts. We're going to go over them later. If you want to, like, if you're here later, you can submit your mock draft in the chat, or you could go to Creamsicle Crew on Twitter and reply to that complete with your mock draft, and we'll get to it. But yeah, I think we should roll right into this draft talk, boys. What do y'all think?
It is that time of year. So let me start with this question. Alex, you covering the Chargers, everyone right now at the top of the mock drafts, they're looking at that big quarterback trade. Is it going to be New England? Is it going to be Arizona? The Chargers, obviously, right in the thick of that conversation, potentially moving down with Minnesota. Where are you at with that? Do you want that to happen? Do you think that'll happen? What's your perspective as someone who's a little bit more connected with the Chargers there?
Yeah, I think that I find it likelier that the Chargers make that trade and that QBs go like 1, 2, 3, 5 than I do that QBs go 1, 2, 3, 4 with Arizona making that trade. I've talked with a few people in the last like week or so here, and this draft in general feels very reminiscent of 2021 when we had Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, and everyone was like, this could be the year that quarterbacks finally go 1 through 4, and it's all the first 4 picks, and they're all quarterbacks, and we just like rip them all off. And then they go 1, 2, 3, and then Fields falls to 11. And I can't shake the feeling that like something like that is going to happen again. I don't think that it'll be necessarily as big of a fall for whoever the 4th guy is. I think it'll be JJ McCarthy, because like you have the Giants at 6, who haven't really been shy about the fact that like they're all systems go for picking a quarterback if one is going to be there. And so I do think it's likelier that the Chargers make that trade than the Cardinals do. As far as like what I want to happen, I would prefer that the Chargers just stay at 5 and take a wide receiver. It's probably not going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. because he's probably going forward to the Cardinals. But like Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, like I'd be fine with that. That's what I would prefer. I do think that there's a distinct possibility that they just stay at 5 and take Joe Alt, which I know a lot of Chargers fans would hate a lot. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. But I do think it's a distinct possibility. Which is why I've been one of the people that's talked about it a lot, is because like it's very, very possible, and it's more possible than you think. But if they do trade down, I mean, picking up an extra first-round pick from Minnesota or from whoever it may be, like Minnesota for the sake of argument, right, having the 11th and 23rd overall pick, I think at that point you're looking at like taking an offensive lineman at 11 and then taking either a corner or a wide receiver depending on how the board falls at 23. And so I think that is also a perfectly good course of action because this wide receiver class is super, super deep. And so like if you're going to wait until 37 to pick a wide receiver, like you're still going to get a like day one impact player, because this wide receiver class runs like 25 guys deep. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely I think JT and I, when we did our kind of positional preview, we spent probably 3/4 of the episode just on the wide receivers. It's insane how deep, and not even just deep, how like it's both deep and top heavy. Like there are probably 20 guys that you could get in the first 3 rounds that are going to be impact players early on in their career. And then you get into like day 3 where there are just depth players galore. I want to just back to that scenario real quick where the trade with the Vikings happens and you end up with 11 and 23. In this kind of hypothetical thing I'm thinking up in my head right now, say Joe Alt and the top 3 receivers are off the board at 11, right? Do you still see them sticking at 11 and taking someone like Olu Fashanu? I know you kind of talked about offensive line there. Is that what you think might happen?
Yeah, I think that they would probably stick at 11. I think that it would probably be not necessarily Fashanu, but more the trio of like Talisi Fuaga, Troy Fatanu, and JC Latham.
Sure.
To take guys that are like more natural, like players on the right side, because they're not flipping Rashawn Slater. Like anyone that they're drafting to play offensive line is going to play right tackle, which is one of the reasons why a lot of Chargers fans don't want Joe Alt to begin with, because he's never played right tackle. Kind of the same thing with Fashanu. Latham is a natural right tackle. They've done a lot of work on him. Fautanu can play on the right side, even though he's primarily been on the left at Washington. There's also been a lot of steam about how, I think it's mostly been Dan Brugger that's been talking about how some teams see Fautanu as the best center in the draft, and like a guy that has like true 5-position flex versatility. And the Chargers sent the O-line coach to Washington Pro Day. They met with him before the Pro Day happened. I can't get it out of my head that like they might be the team that's leaking that, because they don't have a center on the roster either. And so, you know, like that might be something that they pursue. And then obviously Fuaga is massive and like a huge road grader in the run game. And so like kind of is a natural fit for what Harbaugh wants to do on offense. So I do think that like that would kind of be the range of players that you'd be looking at. I think that the value at wide receiver just isn't there at 11 if the top 3 guys are gone. They haven't really done a ton of work on like the top corners. Like they haven't really done a ton of work on Quinyon Mitchell. They've talked to Terrion Arnold quite a bit, but like it might be because they're trying to talk to Kool-Aid McKinstry a whole bunch. Like they've talked to Nate Wiggins a few times, but he seems like he's kind of more of a 20s player at this point. And so I think that like offensive line is where they would be focused if they do move down to that 11th pick.
I'll let you know real quick. You are among friends here with the Troy Fautanu is best at center. We selfishly want him for the Bucs, but I think he tested himself out of that territory. I actually believe when I was like looking at him and watching him, I was like, this is just Rashawn Slater. That was a name that really popped into my mind when I was watching him. And then the whole arm length debate, and then he measured with more than enough arm length. I was like, yeah, this is Rashawn Slater 2.0.
Yeah,
but,
that's a name that he brought up himself.
Yeah.
Talking to him at the combine,
yeah.
That's a guy that he mentioned as like someone that he like models his game after. So that's a good comp.
Yeah, I mean, just the whole thing, it all matches up pretty seamlessly. Even the colors he wore in college. So
definitely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the talent and the depth of this wide receiver class, and no one's going to have more insight than the Washington Huskies. I mean, Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan. Can you tell me how good are these guys really? Is this a situation where Michael Penix kind of elevated them to maybe above their skill level, or did they elevate Penix to make him look like a Heisman contender? And where do you have these guys kind of in your overall pecking order, especially Odunze there at the top?
Yeah, I definitely think it's the latter, as much as I will get yelled at by my Husky fan following on Twitter if they see this. Penix is a guy who, and you've seen kind of some of this reporting come out in the last couple of weeks here, and it's an opinion that I've held for a long time, but I've kind of tried to stay quiet about because it's not a popular one amongst the faithful.
Well, but I'll tell you right now, it won't be popular with our fan base because Michael Penix is a Tampa native. So
yeah,
he is from Tampa.
You're treading into dangerous waters.
That's true. He is a Tampa guy. Yeah. But he's a quarterback who's very generally accurate. He will put the ball in the correct area code, but like he might not hit the right house, if that makes sense, right? Like he will put it in a position where a receiver can make a play. And for a team like the Bucs, that's great because you have Mike Evans and you have Chris Godwin. And so like, fine, that works. And I think for Washington, it works great because you had Rome and Jalen. And so it was easy, right? Like you could just put it in a spot and Rome would go up and get it. Jalen would go up and get it. And so I definitely think that they elevated him a little bit more than he elevated them. I personally have Odunze as my wide receiver 2 behind Harrison. I think that he just offers a little bit more than Neighbors does. Obviously, Neighbors has the speed edge on him, but like Odunze has the blend of speed and like yards after catch ability that like he didn't really get to show a ton. But like if you go back to like his freshman tape at Washington, which like I remember watching because I watched all of those games live because I was a student at UW when it was happening. But nobody else probably remembers. Like he was getting a lot more opportunities to do stuff like that because they had guys like Puka Nacua on the team that were doing more of like the traditional sort of like X stuff at the time.
What a great take, by the way.
Like so he has all of that ability plus he's 6'3" and he can go up and get it like DeAndre Hopkins. And So he is like a top 5 player for me, wide receiver 2. I think he's going to be a stud in the NFL. And then the 2 Jalen's I have kind of right on the fringe of like the 2-3 range. Polk is a guy that I've compared pretty favorably to like Robert Woods. If you want to go for like a more like middle of the road outcome, I think he's very like Josh Reynolds-esque. So like a very like 2018 Rams sort of receiver, where like he's going to block his butt off, isn't going to be super, super flashy. He's never going to be a wide receiver 1, but he's going to be like a rock solid wide receiver 2 for a decade. I think that he's going to be someone that probably sneaks into like the back half of the top 50-ish, just with like some of the visits and everything that have gotten reported for him. And then McMillan, I really think is going underrated in this class because he didn't get to play a ton this season. But one of the things, I was just on a Patriots podcast earlier this week with Taylor Kyles, who's a great Patriots follow, and we were talking about McMillan in the context of Penix, because one of the things about Penix is that like this season he didn't throw over the middle a ton, and a lot of people have questions about like, is it an anticipation issue? Is it, you know, just like the way that the offense was structured? Like, what is it? And I caution people, and I've been doing this for a couple months, where if you have concerns about Penix's ability to throw over the middle, I suggest that you go back and you watch Penix's 2022 tape at Washington when McMillan was fully healthy, and then go back and you watch the 2023 stuff when McMillan is hurt. Because McMillan is the chain mover in that offense. He's the guy that is like going over the middle and just like converting first down after first down after first down. He's not necessarily going to be a huge touchdown production guy, but he's kind of like almost like Jacoby Myers-esque in that way, where like he's just going to be like, he's the guy that you look for on third down out of the slot. He's going to be a super valuable player. Is he ever going to be like a high-end wide receiver 2, a wide receiver 1? Not necessarily, but he's going to keep your offense on schedule always. And so I think that he could go as early as the late second, probably more of a third rounder. But I have him a little bit higher than I've seen him consensus-wise. I know a lot of people have him graded as like a 4th rounder, and I just like don't see him lasting that long, especially with some of the things that I've heard out of Washington the last couple of weeks here.
Yeah, that trio of receivers is just it's really funny how perfectly that wide receiver room was structured in terms of their skill sets. Obviously, you have the top dog in Rome, and then you know the gritty kind of does the dirty work in Polk, and then the chain mover in McMillan, and it all worked together so well. I would have loved to see another full season of McMillan. You were right, but that's a good tip there to go and check out the differences between when he was healthy and not healthy in terms of the Penix avenue. So,
and just a quick spoiler alert, I think we will talk more about these guys later when we do our Bucs mocks.
Yeah.
Two names we've very commonly mocked the Buccaneers in both Polk and McMillan.
Yeah. Like them both, for sure.
So, speaking of people who we like, you talked about Troy Fontenot earlier.
Mm-hmm.
He is my dream scenario Buccaneers pick. I think he is the best interior offensive lineman in the class. But like Garrett said, he may have taken himself out of that range, showing he has the arm length and athletic ability at the combine to play left tackle. Do you have any projection on who might take him? What are the teams that are connected with him? Is there any slim hope or chance that he might be there for the Bucs later on? Just give me something to hold on to here.
He's going to be a top 15 pick. I actually just talked to Troy for like 10 or 15 minutes at spring practice yesterday. He was out there at practice, and so me and a couple other media members got a chance to talk with him a little bit. He just got back from his visit with the Jets. Said that it went really well. He was out there, got dinner with them the first night, and then did his meeting and everything with them afterwards. Obviously, the Jets are at 10. Again, we talked about like he's a potential option if the Chargers trade down, kind of like at 11. I've written articles about how I think he's like a perfect fit for the Saints at 13. Yeah, and so like anywhere from like 10 to 16 with Seattle, I think is his range. I think I would be very, very surprised if he got past Seattle, because they have Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator. They have a need at guard. I think that like it just all of that makes too much sense for that to not be his floor, I think. And like just reading the tea leaves of like the teams that he's taken the meetings with and the teams that he's gone and visited on top 30s and everything, like it seems like that 10 to 16 range is going to be where he's going to go. And like we talked about, I mean, that's well deserved. And I think that most of those teams are going to be looking at him as a guard. But there have been a few teams that have expressed interest in letting him play tackle first.
Yeah, I think that's a really good plan. I mean, he passed all the thresholds you really want to look for. Obviously, there were those concerns, and he truly has played all across that line. But seeing what you got at tackle, the more valuable position, is going to probably pay off in the long run for sure, either way. But if anyone's out there wondering why we're sitting here talking about Washington Huskies football so much, just go look at who Jason Light has drafted in like the last 10 years. That'll answer your question. He's a big fan of the Huskies. They pump out some good football players, that's for sure.
Yep, I'd be surprised if they didn't grab another one this year.
Yeah, I think they might.
There's just too many good players that fit too many needs for the Bucs.
Yeah, I mean, Kate Otten, who do we got? Let's think it. Kate Otten, Joe Tryanshanka. They signed Greg Gaines. Vita, of course. They've drafted more that I don't think are on the team anymore. Or they signed some. But they're big fans of the Huskies, that's for sure. Okay, JT, do you have any more just kind of general draft knowledge questions for Alex?
I could ask a million questions. I could sit here and talk draft all night. But for the sake of Buccaneers fans out there, let's shift this in more of a Tampa Bay direction. Do we want to get into our Buccaneers mock drafts?
I am ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So who wants to go first? Who's going to lead us off?
I'll lead us off.
Do it.
Well, I'll lead us off. We'll go me, Alex, and then you, JT. How about that?
Sounds good.
Okay, so the Buccaneers. I did make one trade, but the pick total is the same. It wasn't in the first round. I'll talk about it when I get there.
So remind the people how we formatted this.
Oh yeah, great call. So kind of when we were talking about doing this, it's a 7-round Buccaneers mock draft. You can use any simulator you want. You can make trades if you want. But we tried to make this realistic, right? We tried to make this predictive and what we think could happen in a week. So that's kind of how we approached doing this. I know I spent never mind. I spent a good amount of time doing this and finding a good option for what I think the Bucs might do. So,
and we've had no conversation about these drafts prior. We'll be seeing these for the first time. There's been no, trying to get different names out there. These are just the names we fit, that we like, that we think suit this team.
The most they've heard is that I'm very happy with what I created here. But so I'm going to preface this by saying there's been a lot of focus on edge rushers for the Bucs, when in reality, with how Todd Bowles uses his defensive fronts, I think it needs to be more geared towards pass rusher, whether that be on the interior or exterior. So I took Johnny Newton out of Illinois, who JT and I are both in agreement that he is the best interior defensive lineman in this class.
And I think it's pretty wide margin on that. I don't think it's all that close.
He's really good from Tampa. This is a guy who just wreaks havoc any time he's on the defensive line. And you look at what the Bucs have been able to construct in Vita Vea and Yaya Diaby on the exterior. You got Kalijah Cansey on the interior. You get another guy to kind of make up for that Logan Hall pick, who is really just looking like a depth piece now. This is a guy that steps in on day one, and that interior of that defensive line is unstoppable, nearly. And then, of course, like I said, Todd Bowles, chess pieces, move them around. You see Vita Vea dropping into coverage every now and then. Probably see Kalijah playing nose at some point. Just some weird stuff that he likes to do. I think this would be another explosive elite pass rusher that you can throw in that mix for Tampa. My next pick is someone that I feel like a couple months ago I wasn't seeing him here, but my mind has kind of been tuned to him. I like him a lot, especially for the Bucs, and that is Christian Mahogany, the interior offensive lineman out of Boston College. The dude is mean. I mean, he is so strong. He's going to provide pretty much that attitude that Ryan Jensen took with him when he unfortunately had to retire from football, and he's going to provide just a road grader mentality for this offensive line that has really struggled to get the run game going in the last couple years. So I sat there at 57 and was like, okay, I'm looking at my options. I know they need to address interior offensive line. I could pick another position, but I was like, I don't really like it. And then, you know, I've really come full circle on Christian Mahogany, where I think he's a very, very good player and fully worth that second round pick.
Let me say this about Mahogany real quick, because I
Yeah.
love Christian Mahogany. He's one of my favorite players. He is such a powerful player, such a mean, nasty road grader at the point of attack. He's surprisingly very good when you ask him to pull and be that lead guy going to the outside. Like, you know, he can move. He is an athlete. His RAS score, I think, was like 9.5. So he is not just a big, you know, throwback, you know, big ugly who just wobbles around and pushes people. You get this man in space and he could lead the train down the field.
The big wobbly guy that pushes people is a funny way of putting it. But yeah, you're not wrong. You are not wrong. Christopher, hello. Good evening. Glad you're joining us. So for my third pick, again, this is the first of the Bucs 2 third-round picks. This is where a Husky breaks into the mix. I picked Jalen McMillan, wide receiver from Washington. I pretty much echo everything Alex said like 5 minutes ago. Chain mover. This is like that Chris Godwin mold of a player where he's just going to be in the right spot whenever you need him to be at all the times. You can trust him on third downs. If there's a really dicey situation where you're not really comfortable, find Jalen McMillan if Mike Evans is covered, and you'll be okay. Is his ceiling as high as Godwin's? Probably not, but this is like just a very, very good wide receiver too for the long run. That you can always trust and always depend upon. Good athlete too, so that helps. Okay, next pick. This is the second of the 2 third-round picks that the Bucs have. Is someone that JT and I have talked about a lot. Someone that the Bucs hosted on a visit, and that is Mike Sainristil, the nickel corner out of Michigan. Feisty player. It's kind of funny because. I think he's better than this draft position, but
I was going to say I think he might sneak up a little higher than that.
Yeah, I was thinking, what kind of back alley simulator did you use where Sainristil fell to the third round?
the simulators it was consistent too, and every single one I ran, he was there. So the simulators might have screwed me over on this one, trying to be predictive, but.
But you know what, though? We saw the same thing with Brian Branch last year. Nickel players, no matter how good they are, because Brian Branch, for me, was a top 5 player in the draft, they slide. They just always seem to. And we know that nickel is a starting position in the NFL nowadays. And these coaches obviously know that because they're playing these players. But it's like they don't know that on draft day.
Yeah, and I'm looking up his RAS right now just because I want to make sure I'm correct on this. Yeah, he's not a big dude. He's under 5'10", which is not something you typically look for in a corner. So that might knock him down a little bit too. But yeah, that's a great point. Nickel, although important, seems to be ignored too much every now and then. But big fan of Sanderson. We've talked about him a lot. Feisty player, used to play wide receiver. You can really tell with his route recognition and his football IQ when he's back there. Reminds me a lot of Dax Hill from a couple years ago with how he jumps routes and plays the point of attack. So another Michigan guy, so it's kind of fitting. But now into that 4th round, I know this is like the big pick where people are like, oh, running back for the Bucs. not so fast. I went tight end. I picked Theo Johnson out of Penn State. Now, this is another guy I could see sneaking up a bit higher than this because of that athleticism. But the tape is really just he's a blocker who doesn't really know how to catch the ball quite yet, or play receiver, I should say. But with that athleticism, it is, I mean, he scored a perfect 10 on the RAS. That is something that you absolutely take. And, you know, looking at it, who was the player? We talked about him a couple weeks ago. The Colts got him. He was a freak athlete, tight end from, I think it was Virginia Tech.
Oh, yeah, Virginia Tech. Who was it?
Jelani Woods. Yes,
Jelani
thank
Woods,
you, Alex.
yes.
Yeah, Jelani Woods. This is someone that I could see kind of having a similar draft projection as him. I think Woods wasn't as good of a blocker as Theo Johnson. Again, trying to be predictive, and I do think this could be where Theo Johnson goes, but there is a strong chance that he goes higher for sure. All right, this is where my trade sneaks in here. I don't know how this got accepted, by the way. This is kind of crazy. I traded 220 and a 2025 fourth for pick 137. So, yeah, and then I picked Marshawn Lloyd, a running back from USC, who I think JT is in agreement with me that is the best pick the best fit for the Bucs at running back among those day 3 guys. He definitely has some fumbling issues. I think he's fumbled a lot in relative terms to like his amount of carries, but really like what he brings to the table. He's a perfect complement for Rachaad White, especially when you need to kind of take him off the field in those shorter yardage situations, so he can kind of not take a beating, because he's not that style of runner who can bash his head into the back of an offensive line to get 2 yards, right? Marshawn Lloyd's a bit squattier, bit thicker, bit lower center of gravity. You know, he's able to take those punches a bit harder and sustain them a bit longer. So big fan of Marshawn Lloyd to the Bucs. And then to round out the mock draft, this is all the way down at like, what is it, 243, I think the pick is. So a huge jump. We really, you know, I made the trade and I was like, I don't think Jason Light has sat this long in a draft before. So I don't expect him to not make a move if he trades up with into the like 4th round again. But I picked Akeem Dent, a safety out of Florida State. Again, talked about him a lot. This is an instant impact special teams player, which is what you're really looking for in the 7th round, and provides some safety depth, which the Bucs don't really have. So a good athlete too.
I like it. I think there's a lot of names that we've talked about there, a lot of names that make a lot of sense. A lot of guys that are, I guess, are becoming our brand guys. I think the consensus Creamsicle Chronicle approval rating.
Yeah, I think so. Especially those first like 5 picks. It's like, I'm very happy with those picks.
All right, so this is the one, not that I'm not interested in Garrett's, but I'm really interested in like the outside perspective. You know, we get in our bubble and we become a little bit of an echo chamber because we have, you know, a like mind, you know, when it comes to these prospects. So I'm interested in what Alex is going to bring as someone who's not constantly, you know, having these conversations, hyping these same couple of guys up. So Alex, I'm really looking forward to what you guys, a kind of a bird's eye view perspective.
Yeah, I definitely had to do this a couple times because I haven't done a ton of Bucs mock drafts, and so like I didn't realize that there was such a huge gap between like the 4th round pick and then like waiting all the way until the 6th. And I would then like I'd get to the 6th round and I'd be like, there's like 4 more positions I want to take. Now I gotta like redo this because I gotta rework my priorities here. Yep. But at 26, I went corner. I went with Kool-Aid McKinstry, who I think like obviously. The Bucs traded Carlton Davis this offseason. The starting corner opposite Jamel Dean looks like it's Zion McCollum right now. And so that's not something I'm super thrilled about, although I do like Zion McCollum. I think that McKinstry has gotten a little bit underrated as like a 1st round guy throughout the process. Obviously had the foot injury that prevented him from doing a lot of stuff at the combine, but he did test through some of that stuff. I do think he's going to end up being a 1st rounder when everything is said and done. It just gets hard because there's only 32 1st round picks, and you could say that about like 40 guys in this draft class. but I think that he fits what Tampa does on defense. I think that he steps in and he's an immediate starter, and kind of locks up like the future of the corner position over on that side. And then in round 2, I also took a guard. I also took a Christian, but I went with Christian Haynes from UConn. Kind of the same idea as Mahogany, is going to bring that sort of like toughness, that mentality back. One of my favorite things about Haynes is that at the Senior Bowl in January, he had a rep against, it was Jordan Jefferson, the LSU D tackle, where Jefferson ripped his helmet off and they got into a little bit of skirmish and stuff. And afterwards, someone asked him about it after practice, and they were like, "Oh, like, what were you saying to him?" And Christian Haynes says, "Oh, well, I told him, if you're scared, go to church." And it's like, yeah, no, that's the perfect offensive lineman right there. Like,
cold-blooded.
You're rising up the board. I don't care like how the rest of the week is for you.
Can't ask for much more.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you talk about like a guy replacing like Ryan Jensen's like mentality out on the field like that. Like that's that guy.
Yeah.
I do also think that he has a little bit of position versatility to him as well. Like if you want to ask him to play center, he probably could. Kind of similar to a Cody Mock in that way. But I think he probably slides in as a starter at guard and you move Mock over to center. Third round, I did go with a Washington guy as well, but I went for the 4-man all UW front on defense and took Braylon Trice to add to Joe Tryon. He's super close with Joe. Him and Latu both are both super close with Joe from being kind of the young guys under his wing back then when Joe was a senior. Braylon is gonna be in that like sort of 3rd, 4th round like fringe range. I think to kind of talk about general stuff again, I do think that he's going to be someone that the Chargers have a little bit of interest in as well. They spent a lot of time with him at Washington's Pro Day. But he, again, is not necessarily like the most finesse rusher, and he's not going to like wow you with the athletic testing or anything, but he gets to the quarterback on like every play. Like his pressure ratio is insane. Like it's one of the highest in the country. It's been one of the highest in the country for 2 straight seasons, even as he was playing through like double teams all year this year. And so like when a guy continues that sort of production facing like NFL level competition and facing double teams against NFL level competition, it's like, okay, I think this is going to translate. Like I'm good with this. I think you're going to be a good NFL player. And like selfishly, the 4-man front of like Joe, Greg Gaines, Vita Vea, Braylon Trice on the other edge, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. That sounds sick. With that 2nd, 3rd round pick, I went linebacker and took Jeremiah Trotter Jr. out of Clemson. I think it might be a little bit high for him, but I didn't really love a lot of the other linebackers around here. I know Brugler in his 7-rounder gave the Bucs Trevin Wallace, I think, at this spot. I'm not a huge Trevin Wallace guy. I know Brugler is. But Trotter, I think, kind of fits the role of what Devin White was doing at the end. Well, not at the end, but like right before the end. When he was
yeah.
Of like, he's going to defend the run and he can't cover. But also it's the 3rd round. And so like, you're not going to get a perfect, like well-rounded player that's great at everything. Trotter is a great run defender. And so like, if you're looking for a 1-to-1 sort of replacement in that role, I think that he makes a lot of sense. Again, would be a little bit high for him. I think that PFF, which is the simulator I used for this, is maybe a little bit high on him. But he's certainly going to be sort of in that range, like a fringe day 2, day 3 guy. So I don't mind going a little bit higher to address a position of moderate need, I would say.
Alex, let me ask you real quick while we're talking linebacker. Washington has a linebacker who I really like, and I can't pronounce his name. It's like Edafon.
Yeah, I think it's Edafon Ulufoshio.
That guy. I like him.
Yeah, no, he's great. I love Eddie.
Where do you think he's going to go? And can you sell me that he is better than Jeremiah Trotter? Because I would argue that he is.
Yeah, I think that they're very different players. I think you're drafting. I'm just going to call him Eddie for the sake of brevity.
Please, hallelujah.
but I think like you're drafting Eddie to be a coverage linebacker. He's one of the better coverage linebackers I think in this draft. But he is an older prospect and he has a pretty extensive injury history. Like he's almost the Michael Penix of defense for Washington. And so that is going to impact him a little bit. Tested like a monster at the combine, and like everyone that I've talked to since then is like, oh yeah, I'm not surprised. That's Eddie. So I think that he's going to go higher than people are expecting. PFF has him still like available in like the 6th or 7th round. I think he's going to be more of like a 5-6 guy, probably. Maybe can sneak up into like the comp range of the 4th. But I think he's going to be a great player. I mean, I try not to be biased with all these guys, and I know my answer for every Washington guy is just like, well, I think they're going to be a great NFL player. But also, like, he went to the national championship game. They have like 10 NFL players on the roster.
They're a decent team. They have a decent team.
Right. Yeah. It's like, okay. But yeah, I think that like the sell, I guess, for him over Trotter would just be like maybe he fits better in a modern NFL defense where like pass coverage is a more important skill than stopping the run. Although I do think that that's changing a little bit with the way that offenses are adjusting to lighter boxes and everything else. I do think that guys like Trotter are going to be more valuable, and it's going to flip not fully, but a little bit kind of more in Trotter's direction. But if you're looking for a sell, that would be it, is that like he's a much better athlete. He's a much better coverage linebacker. Like if you want someone to be the eventual Levante David heir rather than the Devin White replacement, I think that Eddie makes more sense in that sort of role than Trotter does.
Okay, because we were talking linebackers last week when we did our back 7 preview. Eddie was my 5th ranked linebacker in this class, and I don't love this linebacker class after the top 3, but I had him in and Trotter out, so I really like what he brings to the table. So it's not just a Washington perspective. I want to make sure I wasn't crazy. I want to make sure, hey, this guy's a bum. Don't even bother talking about him.
Definitely not. Yeah,
I think that right before you keep going, I think that last line is pretty much why you like him a lot, JT. Maybe more of a Levante David step in than Devin White. So I think that's going to resonate with a lot of Bucs fans if you tell them that.
Yeah, for sure. In the 4th round, I did go running back. I know Garrett mentioned that's like kind of the spot where everyone is pegged a running back.
I mean, there's a reason.
Right. Yeah. And kind of in the same sort of vein of like you were talking about, like you kind of want to get Rachaad White off the field in short yardage situations, maybe bring in more of like a bruising guy. I went with Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin. I think that Allen has gotten a bad rap this draft cycle because he had to play in a Phil Longo offense in 2023. And I hate Phil Longo so much.
DK Metcalf.
Yeah, he is one of the like foremost war criminals in college football. I hate him so deeply. And I mean, you're going from a Wisconsin offense that like is Wisconsin, right? In 2022, where it's like we're going to run the ball 40 times a game and we're just going to run it out the middle on you over and over and over again, and like the forward pass was a mistake. And you go from that, which is what Allen excels at, like a gap scheme, just like run the ball up the middle, ask him to make one cut, and then you put him in what is effectively the air raid in 2023 with Longo, and like Tanner Mordecai is the quarterback until he breaks his hand, and it's like
4 routes.
Of course it's going to be worse. This isn't like what he's going to do ever. Yeah. And I know like people are concerned about the fact like he didn't run a 40 at the combine or at his pro day, just like chose not to, wasn't injured or anything. That's not really an important part of his game either. And it kind of is similar to a discussion that I know a lot of people have been having about a similar guy that would be available in this range, which is Audric Estime, and his 40 time, which is like, there's not that many 40-yard runs ever. And so really like what I'm concerned about with running backs is 10-yard split times. Estime's is great. Allen obviously didn't record one, but if he did, I'm sure it would be fine. And so I think like if you're going to bring him in as more of like a gap sort of guy of just like bring him in short yardage, bring him in to run the ball up the middle. Basically my rationale for this pick was, what was the thing I hated watching about the Bucs offense the most? And it's, oh yeah, they keep running Rachaad White up the middle and he can't do it. And I would really like for them to just run him on like stretch and outside zone and like let him get outside the tackles. And they
Welcome to the fandom. Wow, you've already made a great impression.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, what if they just had a guy that they could have do that instead, so that Rashad doesn't have to do that anymore? Perfect, Braylon Allen. In the 6th round, I addressed nickel. I went with Jalen Simpson out of Auburn, who I really like as a nickel guy. I think he's getting underrated a little bit. Kind of a weird player. He's more of like a true tweener between nickel and safety than a lot of these other guys that are going to play nickel. So kind of similar to like maybe a Christian Izzian type player as like a nickel safety more than like a nickel corner. But does have experience at corner. And I mean, he's played a ton of nickel at Auburn. That entire Auburn secondary between him and the 2 corners that are coming out this year, I think are all going to be in that like round 3 to 6 range. But he's someone I really like. Another guy that would just like add depth on special teams, be a depth piece like Garrett mentioned, doesn't really have a lot of depth at safety. And then at 246, the 7th round pick, I went with Bub Means, the Pitt wide receiver.
Athlete.
Yeah, great athlete. Got watch him live at the Shrine Bowl back in January. Had a great week there. I've talked with our friend Nick Faribaugh about him a ton. Nick covers Pitt and the Steelers pretty extensively, and he said that like, you know, Bub is a great kid. Like he's going to be a good addition to an NFL team. There's going to be production questions with him of just like he never really did a ton as a college receiver. But as a 7th round pick, bring him in as a special teamer. He's a great athlete. A little bit of a dart throw is probably going to be like, you know, added depth at X receiver, and you know, come away with something out of this receiver class. I think that he has the potential to be to really outplay this draft slot, and so I'm high on him, and so I closed out the draft with him.
I mean, the Bucs, they do love their late wide receiver pick. It's pretty much a staple in their draft cycle. I mean, you got, let's think it through, Scotty Miller, you got Trey Palmer just last year. Who was before Scotty? Justin Watson. Like, you could name a lot of guys. I think Kenny Bell one year. Like, they draft receivers late a lot, and you know they do a pretty good job at it. They get production from them, so that's a great call. We're gonna sit for like 2 seconds and go over his. I think JT, you want to, because it's like the probably the one that's most outside of what we've been hearing for the last couple of weeks and months for the Bucs. Yeah. So
the one that's jumped out to me right away was the Braylon Allen pick.
Yeah.
And my cry all offseason for the Bucs running back is get your version of the Gus bus. Get you a Gus Edwards. Just a guy you can hammer up the middle and get, you know, he doesn't have to get 40 yards, but, you know, get 4. You know, just be consistent in getting those tough, gritty yards that, you know, you really need to get when you're in the red zone and you're short down or short yardage situation. And that's where the Bucs really struggled last year. So guys like guys like Allen, guys like Estime, they are very much the blueprint of that kind of mold. And my only hesitation with guys like that is I don't love their burst, but in terms of the mold player that they are, I think they are what the Bucs are looking for. So that one jumped out to me as like, hey, this fits what I want.
Yeah, I love the context you provided there with kind of like the Phil Longo offense thing. I think maybe in the long run, him not running a bunch this year might have helped his long-term outlook in the NFL. I mean, less carries is good for a running back a lot of the times. And then another thing you talked about with Trotter is that boxes are getting lighter. You know, defensive linemen are getting smaller, linebackers are getting smaller. A big running back like that is going to do some damage to some players in this league pretty consistently until they course correct in a couple years. But yeah, I'm a big fan like that. I like, you know, Estime as a overall player. I might not be like, he's not my style, but for the Bucs, I'm in. And then guys like Allen, and then to a bit of a lesser degree, Marshawn Lloyd. But yeah, love that pick for sure.
Yeah,
Bring power football back.
Yeah.
And what you mentioned where the league evolves and, you know, people have to adjust, that's what made the Patriots so great for so long. You know, they were the team that, you know, okay, we're not going to run the ball, but we're going to dump it off to our running back a million times and do, you know, just the dink and dunk kind of offense. And that worked really well. And then the league adjusted and they said, okay, we're going to get Randy Moss and we're going to just beat you over the top all the time. And that worked really well. And they said, okay, leads to Justin this. We're going to get 2 dynamic tight ends, and we're just going to kill you over the middle. So as soon as the league starts to zig, the smart teams are already starting to zag and adjust to that. So, it's a passing league. It's been a passing league for a while. Teams like Detroit becoming more of a power run team, finding a lot of success. The 49ers, more of a run team, finding a lot of success. The Ravens, it's kind of zigging back in that direction. And good teams that want to be competitive, they have to adjust to that.
Yeah, and the Bucs, they want to, they just don't have the means. So this will help fix that. But I'm gonna jump to that first round pick to Kool-Aid McKinstry. JT and I have talked about Kool-Aid just last week, and we are both on record saying it is not our preferred first round pick for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but it does make sense. JT, why don't you give a quick rundown of what you think of Kool-Aid? Because I think it's a bit more unfavorable than me, but
I am. And for me, it's the athletic profile of Kool-Aid. He's just not the premier athlete that I desire for what the Bucs look for. But the one thing I do like about him is his versatility. He can play man, he can play zone. So Bucs might be shifting more in a zone direction. Kool-Aid can do that, and he can do it well. And he wants to play more man in the red zone. Kool-Aid can do that, and he can do it well. So I don't think he's my flavor just because I desire those top-tier athletic traits, particularly in the corner where it's so reactive, and I want my corners twitched up in a big way. So I think for me, that's my big hang-up on Kool-Aid. But overall, the logic makes sense. Versatile player. Todd Bowles is a DB mastermind. It's a natural fit when you talk about player and coach. It's just, I don't know, he's my cup of tea for this team.
Yeah, I think my big hang up with Kool-Aid there is I think I prefer a lot of different situations in the first round. I don't know how the board felt for you, but whenever I did a mock, you can land one of like Powers Johnson, Graham Barton. Sometimes you get someone like Johnny Newton there. Maybe a Laiatu Latu. I don't know why he's falling in these simulators. Medicals for sure, but like he's a freak.
Yeah, he's crazy.
Guy's insane, but it's just like the opportunity cost for me thing. That's the only reason. But the Trotter pick, I can absolutely see the Bucs seeing the same reasoning you're like, and like, hey, he's pretty flashy against the run. They already fell for it once, so hopefully they learn from it. But I can absolutely see that they are trying to fill that void.
Let me. Oh, go ahead.
Go for it.
No, I was gonna say, let me mention my favorite pick in that mock was Christian Haynes.
Oh, yeah, awesome pick.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a better natural fit for what the Bucs are doing than Christian Haynes. I think he's the perfect fit for what they want. And the guy I compare him to when I'm talking about player profile, I see so much Shaq Mason when I watch him. Just super light on his feet, super mobile. He's going to thrive in a zone system. And he's got that chippy attitude that I love. And you go back and you watch, tape from 2022 against Michigan when UConn played them, going up against, Chris Jenkins, who's one of the best run defenders in this draft class, a freak athlete. He went toe-to-toe with him, and he didn't give an inch. So, we talk about he's not a power profile, but he is strong enough, and he can go toe-to-toe with anyone, and he's just an absolute dog, and I just love his game.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I think it's funny. I just want to say one quick thing about Trice. You get like the super athletic, kind of underdeveloped edge rusher and Joe Tryon-Shank on one side, and then you get the bit more average of an athlete, just bull rush demon on the other side with Braylon Trice. Like, I think that'd be funny.
If you could combine them, they're a perfect player.
Yeah, exactly. Put them together, best edge rusher in the league.
Get like the Dragon Ball Z like combined dance.
Yeah. No, but overall, I think that's it's definitely a mock draft that I don't think a lot of Bucs fans will have seen up to this point. Maybe it's names that they're like, oh, I see him when I do my mock, but they don't really know anything about him. So that was some very good insight you provided.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do
JT,
think.
want to round us? Oh, go for it.
Oh no, I was just gonna say real quick on McKinstry. I do think that I do agree with the athleticism thing. I think that for me, the thing that I always come back to is that for a lot of guys at corner, you can make up for athleticism if you are super instinctual and you are super confident in those instincts.
Yeah.
And I think that Kool-Aid has that. I don't think it's all the way there yet, but I think that he has the makings of that. And so that's kind of what makes me a little bit higher on him, of just if you can really build that out and you can say hey, you're never going to be the best athlete on the field, but especially if the Bucs are going to move to more of a zone system, the classic example of this, right, which is not a player comp, and I'm not suggesting that he's ever going to be this player, but the classic example of this is Richard Sherman, right, where it's even as Sherman got older and was was an even more average athlete than he was coming into the league, he was the most instinctual corner on the field always, and he was always in the right position, and he always was confident that he was going to be right. And I see a little bit of that same trait in Kool-Aid, and so I think that's why for me the athleticism is not as much of a concern. But I also totally get you want to take a flashy athlete, you want to take excuse me, you want to take a top tier athlete like that because you can it's easier to coach instincts and confidence and all of that stuff than it is to coach athleticism.
Oh, absolutely.
So I totally get both sides of that. But
yeah, and to your point, all the reports, there are two names that consistently comes up as this guy is a brilliant defensive player, and that's Mikey Sanderstill and that's Kool-Aid McKinstry. And you always hear it. These guys are very, very intelligent players. They are guys who are going to organize your back seven. These are the guys. Nick Saban, he doesn't trust people easily, but this is a guy who Nick Saban put the trust in, and he helped run and organize that defense. So you're right. What you lack in physicals, you have to make up in smarts. And by all accounts, from people who are much more connected than I am, Kool-Aid does that.
And I do want to say one more thing. The Bucs are going to be on your side, Alex. They're not afraid of taking corners with lackluster testing. The only thing that's fighting against you, and this is where your lack of Bucs knowledge comes in, is the Buccaneers have a threshold of athlete that they do not touch in the first round, and that is pretty much a 9. If you're not a 9+ on the RAS, odds are you're not going to be a Buc, which is something funny, but that's where our tendencies and what we've picked up have, they come into play there. But
R.I.P. Darius Robinson.
Yeah, that was a pick for a bit, and then he tested weird. So,
all right.
JT?
So
yes, sir.
I will roll out mine here. I'll follow the big name, and I'll be that other guy. So my first pick, I think this is the pick I'm kind of zeroing in on, which I think is the most likely pick for the Bucs. And that's Jackson Powers Johnson, the center out of Oregon. I think they really like Graham Barton. Trevor Sycamore reported that they love Graham Barton, but it seems like a lot of teams really love Graham Barton, and I think he's going to be off the board at this point, which is fine by me because I prefer Jackson Powers Johnson anyway. But, you build in the trenches, you start to develop that run game. It all starts up front. You need a center, you need a left guard. He could play either. So you still have flexibility to pick another offensive lineman if you want to, a Christian Haynes, a Christian Mahogany, whatever your flavor is. So I just think in terms of a guy to replace Ryan Jensen, to bring, the intelligence to call things at the line, he comes off as a guy who's very bright. I really like Jackson Powers Johnson. I wish he got to test athletically because of that threshold that you mentioned. But, watching the tape, he looks like a plus athlete. So I'm all in. JPJ, that's my guy.
I want to say one thing. I think what the Steelers do is going to impact the Buccaneers quite directly.
Definitely.
So just a quick little thing there.
I know. And not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I could see them going in so many different ways. Yeah. I could see them moving up for a guy like Brian Thomas. I could see them taking Graham Barton. I could see them taking a guy like JC Latham or JPJ or Mims.
A lot of stuff that they could do. But I think whatever they do is gonna, that's gonna put a hindrance on those 5 to 7 players that Jason Light talked about that they feel comfortable taking at 26.
Yeah, and there's a lot of teams right in that range. Miami could be looking interior
Yeah, true.
offensive line. Living here in Michigan, a lot of Lions fans want the Lions to move up and get JPJ. So it's a hot name, but
Yeah.
You look at the big name mock drafts, the people who are really connected, the Bolgers, the McShays. A lot of people have JPJ sliding out of the first round. So I don't know what that means. I think he's certainly a first round player, but the league can be funny. Creed Humphrey fell to the second round. A lot of really good interior guys fall to the second round. So I don't know. I do think he'll be on the board as I've kind of begun the process of narrowing down my final mock drafts.
Yep.
But you're right. There are a lot of different ways it could turn where he's not.
Yep. Sorry to cut you off there, but I just wanted to throw that in.
Oh, no, all good. So my next pick, I stuck in the trenches, went to the defensive side, and I don't think this is my ideal pick for the Bucs. Actually, I really like this name for the Chargers. But the name I picked was Chris Jenkins. And he is someone who the Bucs met with at the Combine. He is extremely athletic. He has potential to be a very good pass rusher, but right now he's a great run defender with potential of maybe being more, but isn't yet. And I really think the Bucs would rather get a guy like Braden Fisk or Ruka Roro, because I think they have more pass rush ability. But I definitely think Braden Fisk will be off the board. Roro could be there, and specifically for the Bucs, I think I would prefer that, just getting more of a pass rush element. But he wasn't there in my simulation, so I went with Chris Jenkins. Meet that need in the trenches, kind of make up for the Logan Hall pick, a guy who can play 5-tech, a guy who can play 3-tech, and when you have a guy like Kalijah Cansey who can do everything, he can twist and stunt, and you can start him on one side of the line and he moves to the other side of the line. You've got a little bit more to play with a guy like Jenkins. So I think he'd be a really nice complement to what the Bucs have. And I think he's going to be a high floor player as a run defender.
Not to mention Vita Vea. That helps free up some blocks to develop your pass rushing.
Yeah, big time. So run defense gets a huge shot in the arm, and hopefully pass rush does too. But like I said, I'd prefer a Fisk or a Roro for that kind of pass rush juice that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Third round pick, Garrett, very much like you, I took Jalen McMillan. I think he is a perfect player for what the Bucs are looking for. They're running the Sean McVay offense, and I think McMillan would thrive in that Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua kind of role. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a guy who's thriving in the slot in Detroit. And again, we've talked about Jalen Polk on this show. I think he's more of that Amon-Ra kind of mold than McMillan is. But I think both would do really, really well in the slot with some inside-outside versatility and just be that chain mover, be that guy who's always available. You don't have to go, 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns like Mike Evans. You could go 100 receptions and 1,000 yards and just get those first downs, very much like a Josh Reynolds, always making those big catches, those first down catches, and keeping things rolling, keeping things on schedule. I put a lot of value in that, and I think McMillan is going to be really, really good. With my third round pick, I picked Chris Abrams-Drain, corner out of Missouri. And believe me, if Mikey Samerstil is still on the board to fill that nickel role, I'm sprinting up and I'm taking Mikey Samerstil. But I just don't see that being the case. So Abrams-Drain is kind of a similar mold, and he's kind of that next tier down. So I'm taking him. I really want to strengthen that nickel position, get some more depth in that cornerback room. And, if Zion McCollum doesn't pan out as a starter this year, then you still feel pretty good about Jamel Dean and Antoine Winfield and hopefully Abrams-Drain. So you still have a pretty solid secondary in place, even if McCollum struggles again. It doesn't take that next step that we're all kind of hoping he does. So I like adding some more talent, some more depth in terms of secondary and improving the coverage there. 125, I took Marshawn Lloyd. Same logic. I want a guy who's going to do damage between the tackles. He's got that bowling ball build. He's like 5'8", 220. That's what I'm looking for. I want, a Maurice Jones-Drew type of guy, someone who is just short and thick. And, the fact that he can break one off and take it to the house every now and again, don't mind that. Yep. So, I like that one-cut running style. Again, Estime, Braylon Allen, they would all fit into the mold that I'm looking for. But I just prefer Marshawn Lloyd as a player.
Yeah.
And then big skip down to 220. I went with the tight end. I took Eric All from Iowa. And, Iowa, they are legendary for their offense. And not really in a good way, but this is kind of the exception. So I think All is going to be a really good depth receiving tight end, kind of fill that Cam Brate mold, probably more athletic than Cam Brate was. But Cade Otton, he is solid. He is well-rounded. He is okay. If I could add a guy like a Cam Brate who can, make big catches and be a dependable receiving option, I want that, especially in the 6th round. If you can get a guy who can fill a legitimate role in this offense that late, that's a home run pick.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a pretty good one.
And then my last one, there wasn't any names I really liked on the board, so I went with Trey Taylor, safety out of Air Force. He's more of a nickel, which is a little bit redundant, having already taken Chris Abrams' drain. But, just keep adding talent, keep, filling that hole until you got something. And maybe he's just special teams, maybe he's just practice squad. But if there's an injury, he's a guy who can step in and kind of fill that role. Maybe Abrams' drain moves more outside if Zion struggles and you're looking for more talent at nickel. It just gives you more options, more versatility with what you can do with your back seven. So it's a guy who the Bucs, I think, have met with on a top 30 visit. There's a connection there. So I went with that one.
Did he win the Thorpe Award, or was he just a finalist?
He did win, yeah.
He did.
Thorpe from Air Force. That's impressive.
Yeah, best DB in college football last year. So that's a big time accolade. So yeah, I think now I'm just gonna run through mine one more time, and then Alex, you can run through yours, and then JT, you can run through yours, just to give everyone a refresher. So my draft: Johnny Newton in the 1st round, Christian Mahogany in the 2nd, Jalen McMillan in the 3rd, Mikey Sanders still in the 3rd, Theo Johnson in the 4th. I then traded up back into the 4th to get Marshawn Lloyd, and then with the final 7th round pick, I picked Akeem Dent.
I went Kool-Aid McKinstry in the 1st round, Christian Haynes in the 2nd, Braylon Trice with the 1st 3rd round pick, and then Jeremiah Trotter with the 2nd 3rd rounder, Braylon Allen in the 4th, Jalen Simpson in the 6th, and then Bub Means in the 7th.
Yeah. JT?
Side note, Bub Means, that's such a cool name. That's a football player name.
It's a football name, absolutely.
Okay, my draft. I took Jackson Powers Johnson at 26. I took defensive lineman Chris Jenkins at 57. Took wide receiver Jalen McMillan at 89. Took cornerback Chris Abrams Drain at 92. I took Marshawn Lloyd at 125. I took Eric All at 220. And I took Trey Taylor at 246.
That's going to do it for our mock drafts. We have just three replies, really 2.5, because one was one of the free trial ones on the PFF one, so it's a 3-rounder. But I'm just going to share my screen here, and we can give our thoughts on these mock drafts. All right. Nope, Chrome tab. All right, should be sharing. Bam. There it is. Look at that. All right.
Who gave us this one? This is a lovely one.
The Bucs Report.
The Bucs Report.
Twitter.
Fine publication right there. Quality content.
Hey, JT, who writes for them? Why don't you tell them a little bit about
Smart people that other people should listen to.
Yeah, so Bucs Report NFL provided us with this mock draft for the Buccaneers. And much like Alex led it off with Kool-Aid McKinstry there at 26, you're definitely not alone in that thought train, Alex. Kool-Aid's one that's been circling Bucs Twitter for a couple of weeks now. I kind of just echo the same thoughts I gave to yours. Athleticism doesn't match up with what they look for in the 1st round, and I just think the opportunity cost there is best used elsewhere. Next pick, love it, Zach Frazier. Awesome player. I don't think he's going to be there, but that is a home run pick if he is.
Just real quick, Alex, are you putting together like a top 100 or anything?
No, I'm not going to have enough time to do a big board, but I will be doing I think a first round mock draft because I have a couple of days left. But
where do you fall?
Ran out of time for the big board this year.
Where do you fall on Zach Frazier? I mean, do you think he's, a top 30 player, a top 50 player? I know I'm a big fan, but
yeah, I think I have him as probably a top 30 player, like maybe top 40. If I really think about it really hard, but I think he's gonna go in the top 40. I can't imagine that all three of Barton, Powers Johnson, and Frazier make it past 37.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's there's no shot.
I had to think to myself, who's picking at 37?
Yeah. If one of those three is available at 37, which would probably be the latter two, because it seems like Barton's going to be like a top 20, 25 pick. Yeah. If one of those two is available at 37, that's the pick. So, they're both top 40 players. I really like Frazier. Obviously, had a little bit of a weird pre-draft just with recovering from the leg injury and stuff. But he's awesome. And I think the only limitation that you would really have with him is that he's more of a strict center than the other two guys. But he's really good at center. So I don't care.
Yeah, no, that's it's so weird. The Bucs either love him or hate him, by the way. There's no in between because they do this weird thing where they'll sometimes draft people they haven't spoken to a single time, and they have no reported contact with Zach Frazier.
Which is crazy because they've met with every other offensive lineman under the sun.
Yeah. So it's kind of weird. But next pick there at 89 is Cameron Kinchins. Not going to lie, Bucs report, don't like it. This is a no-go for me. Kinchins is a garbo athlete.
No Kinchin slatter. I don't care if he's a bad athlete or not.
He sucks at running straight.
His tape tells me he doesn't, though.
I don't know, man. That was not...
I know. It was a brutal combine for all the safeties. This safety class just got annihilated in the combine.
It's not a good one, that's for sure. Also, again, this is a big old, I think there are better players there than a safety, especially with the strengths of this class. I think for what you want out of a safety, you're not really going to get in Kinchins, especially with the Jordan Whitehead signing. I think you just need a guy who can be a depth piece. So I wouldn't even care if that's friggin' Tyler Nubin there. I wouldn't really love the pick. So that's just me.
Next one is an interesting name who we haven't really talked a lot about. I think I'm glad that it got brought up into this mock. Have you watched Brandon Dorless?
I haven't. I've seen bits and pieces, but I haven't sat down and watched him. No.
I don't think he's a bad fit for what the Bucs are looking for. He's got some pass rush ability. He's got, some pass rush moves in his arsenal. The thing I struggle with, it doesn't ever feel like he has a great plan. I see the moves. I just don't see him stringing them together in any kind of sequence that makes him as effective as I'd like him to be. But he looks like a solid athlete. He looks like he's got some ability, just hasn't fully put it all together yet.
We've talked a couple of times through the course of this about getting guys to be the Logan Hall guy on the Bucs.
Yeah.
That's what this would be. He pretty much is Logan Hall.
Yeah, he's a tweener. He's 6'2", 280.
Yeah, he's 280. He's listed at edge, but he's going to be a full-time 5 tech. And so it's taking Logan Hall to be Logan Hall, basically. Which, if you're taking that guy in the 3rd round instead of at the top of the 2nd, is pretty good value. But yeah, it's a very similar sort of player, and so if Logan Hall has a role in the defense, then Logan Hall the sequel would also have a role in the defense. So Logan I definitely
Hall
think it
2
fits
Electric
with,
Boogaloo.
Yeah, it definitely fits like what the Bucs would be doing. It's just a matter of like, do you want two guys that are Logan Hall?
I don't know if we want one guy that's Logan Hall.
Yeah, we were very critical of that pick a couple of years ago. But I also, real quick, I forgot to say this before we started. If anyone is in the chat and they want to submit a mock draft, feel free. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, I see you 96 people hiding out there. Don't be shy.
96. But next up, I mean, if Christian Mahogany's there at 125,
Oh
man. Oh, that's like the steal of the century.
That's a sprint the card.
Oh yeah, that's like you see the clock pop up and the time doesn't even show. It's just pick is in on the ticker.
Disconnect the phone. Not making any calls. Just call the pick in. Let's get going.
We talked about him earlier. Christian Mahogany is an awesome player. Love what he can bring.
If he played for the Bucs last year, he would have been their best interior offensive lineman.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
And I like Cody Mock. I think he's well ahead of schedule, but we drafted him knowing he was going to be a little bit of a project.
Yeah.
Maybe he has a higher ceiling than Mahogany. I don't know that he does, but maybe. But right here, right now, I'm not convinced Mahogany's not the best player of that group.
I'm with you. Down to the 6th round is edge Miles Cole from Texas Tech. I'm unfamiliar with Miles Cole.
You want to talk about underdeveloped guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. Miles Cole is like if Tyree Wilson was like a little bit worse, I guess.
Okay.
Sure. In the sense that like he is also like built like a pterodactyl, and he's got his wingspan is like 86 or something. Maybe it got knocked down to 84 once he got measured by like the combine people. But he's super long, has no idea how to do anything with it, and like is already a senior. But if you can ever teach him how to do anything with it, he'll be sick.
Hey, I mean, for a 6th-round pick, I'll take it.
Yeah,
Pretty
exactly.
good.
Right.
What the heck is playing in my computer?
We are very much of the mindset at this point in the draft. You are drafting traits.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like just taking dart throws on athletes and hoping they develop into something.
Yeah, 100%. To round out this draft, Bucs Report drafted Frank Gore Jr. from Southern Miss. NFL bloodline. I think he's a bit bigger too, right? Like he's very much so.
He's little.
What? Wait,
like which is wild because Frank Gore Sr. was a tank.
Yeah, he's little, but he's a little bit like squattier. He's a little bit like
5'7", 215.
Yeah.
Is he 215? Okay. I've got him here listed as like 185.
Oh no way! Where?
I'm not looking at the combine. This is Sports Reference.
Okay, let me pull up his combine because I want
Frank Gore Jr.
Yeah. Let's see.
That is a huge gap between 201, so he's like right in the middle.
Okay, so
I'm like 198. But
not really what I'd look for the Bucs. I know it's a nice name, but I think ideally you bump up Christian Mahogany to that Kinchins pick, eliminate Kinchins, and slide a running back right in there at 125, and we're
Don't do that to Kinchins. We love Kinchins on this podcast.
No, we don't.
Half of us love Kinchins on this podcast.
Don't group me in there. But yeah, we appreciate Bucs Report for submitting a mock draft for us to roast. Next, this one's a bit weird. I've never seen this simulator, and it looks like they just give them a pick per round, or they traded.
Yeah, I don't know what simulator that is.
Yeah, this is Draft Buzz.
Draft Buzz.
Oh,
okay,
Bucs Report has they work with Draft Buzz, so I should probably know that.
Oh, they do. Absolutely. I've just never used their simulator. Okay, fair enough.
I think it's pretty new.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what. Did they just wrongly assign a team? Because these are just not the picks. 107.
Yeah, it just has.
I think there's probably some trades because it's 26 and 57.
So yeah, it looks like most of the picks are right. So they must have traded down.
You're right. There were definitely some trades. So exactly that. We appreciate your submission here. We will talk through it. First,
Shout out
Troy
to the
Fontenot.
bird. That's my guy right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big Steelers
Troy,
fan, so we appreciate him sending in some Bucs Rove.
there we go. Troy Fontenot at 26 would be a dream selection, but like we talked about, it's tough to see him getting out of the top 15.
Yeah. No, I think Alex is wrong, and I think this is right. This is probably more where he lands.
Yeah, yeah. Just not just Alex. Like the whole football world is incorrect.
The whole football world is incorrect all the time.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah, you're not wrong. But this is probably one where they're not, because I definitely see him going top 20, probably top 15 for sure. Like you said, 17 with the Seahawks just makes way too much sense. So.
Yeah.
That should be his floor. Round 2, pick 57, TJ Tampa. Funny enough, from the Tampa Bay area. He is from Polk County, which is like 30 minutes east of Tampa. But oh no, he's from St. Pete. Actually, I can't remember.
Can anyone verify what TJ stands for? Because in my heart, I believe his name is Tampa James Tampa.
Yeah, I don't think that's it. Let's see if I can find it. The TJ in Tampa's name stands for Tampa Jr. So he's a son of someone with evidently the same name, but he just goes by TJ.
What is that name? Because you just said Tampa Jr. Because it is Tampa.
Yeah, it is.
Tampa Jr. Tampa.
Tampa Jr. Tampa is what the TJ stands for. Yeah, you're correct.
I choose that to be the case.
Yeah, we talked a bit about TJ Tampa last week. JT, what did you have him at again?
He was just outside my top 10 for the Bucs. I think I had him at 11.
Okay.
Just a little stiff-hipped for me. I prefer Cam Hart, who's kind of in that same mold as a bigger body corner. But when you can bring Tampa to Tampa, you have to.
Yeah, no, I mean it's the namesake. You got to do it. Alex, any thoughts on TJ Tampa?
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I think he's a little bit stiff for like what I normally like. This is a good range for him though. I think like might go a little bit higher, just because like he's more of like a finished product sort of player.
Yeah.
But I think this is probably around where I would expect him to go.
Yeah. Next up is Jonah Ellis from Utah, a guy that we really haven't talked a lot about, but a guy that I'm a decent fan of. I don't
think we've mentioned his name once.
Yeah, I like Jonah Ellis. I think he's a very advanced pass rusher in terms of just his move set and his hand usage.
I like Ellis a lot. I got the chance to talk to him at Shrine Bowl. I would talk through some of his process and stuff, and you can tell how detail oriented he is with like chaining moves together.
Yeah.
He really likes to go from that like double swipe to an inside spin counter that you see like on his film like all the time.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
And he like I think again this is probably going to be a pretty good range for him. Again, is going to be more of like a trice style individual more than like a try on one, where it's like more of a pocket pusher sort of guy, more of a like developed like guy who's going to have maybe 5 or 6 sacks a season, but maybe like never becomes like a 10-15 sack guy. But defends the run well, as like another like guy to set the edge. I think he's a good pick.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned his counters because I'm looking at my little report for him. That was the only positive I had listed for him.
Oh,
and the way I do my reports is I do positive, negatives, and like question marks or neutrals. Right. And for me, like there's like 7 things that I think he's kind of like okay at, but his counters I think he's really good. He has a nice spin move inside, and I think he is that. If Joe Tryon could do what Jonah Ellis does in terms of counters, Joe Tryon would be a Pro Bowler.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
He just doesn't have those tools I'm looking for. So I guess I'm officially the Jonah Ellis hater on this podcast.
No, I think this is like you said, Alex, I think this is a really good range for him, kind of like the end of day 2, because he's not really going to have too much pressure on him. But the next pick there, 107, Audric Estime. talked about it earlier. Love the style of runner that you'd be bringing in there. Really good in short spaces, tough to bring down, huge guy, exactly what the Bucs need. I'm going to move right along again. Probably not going to spend too much time on this one either. Jalen McMillan. This one kind of in line with what you were talking about earlier in the show, Alex. You've been seeing some places have him slip into the 4th, so could be very true. But I feel like he'd go a bit higher. But again, just a very solid all-around receiver, not going to mess up. You can trust him a lot. This is one that we haven't talked about a ton, JT, but they brought him in on a visit, and that is Tanner Bortolini, center from Wisconsin. And I think they brought him in on a visit like last week or really earlier this week.
I actually just started watching him today, so I don't have a ton of exposure, but my initial thoughts are I like him. I like him better than like a guy like Cedric Van Brandt, who I just don't think has the oomph to really push people around in the NFL.
Yeah.
But I don't really have an in-depth opinion on him yet.
Yeah, he was a Senior Bowl guy, right?
Yeah, Senior Bowl guy. Ran the fastest 3-cone for a center ever at the combine.
Yeah, that was nice.
I think that he's going to be more of a like finesse scheme guy. Like if you're trying to do like power football, which is so ironic, it goes back to like what we were talking about with Wisconsin's offense earlier, right? Where it's like always the entire time that I've been alive, like Wisconsin is known as like the power football school, and now like even their center that they have that was recruited by the power football people, it's like I think he's more of a finesse guy. What is Phil Longo doing to America?
Get your stuff straight, Wisconsin. What are you doing?
But yeah, I think he's going to be more of a finesse guy. I think like if you want to get him out like on poles and stuff in like an outside zone scheme, he's going to be great at that. I mean, he's a super great athlete. I think this is maybe a little bit lower than I would have him board wise, just because like, but also center is a weird position to like so I could see it happening. But yeah, I think maybe not exactly what the Bucs are trying to do on offense. But if they want to move more towards like a, spread out sort of like get Rachaad White on more outside zone stuff, which like, please God, then yeah, I'm down.
Yeah, you definitely see the Bucs kind of moving that direction, but they still value their nasty nature. That's definitely something that they want to keep around. But I mean, Dave Canales worked more of it in than Byron Leftwich, and I would presume Liam Cohen is going to work more of it in than Dave Canales. Just what my gut inclination and what I've seen from Cohen is telling me. So I mean, it makes sense to me why they would have interest in him. All right, got a tab over the last 2 picks here. Wow. Trevin Wallace here at 220. I feel like he's going way earlier than that.
Yeah. I did mention that I was lower on him. Brugler had him at 92 in the 7-rounder that he did going to the Bucs. I did mention that I was lower on him. I'm not that low on him. Hang on.
Yeah, that's really low.
That is really low. But another Senior Bowl guy was pedestrian at the Senior Bowl. I mean, linebacker is so hard at the Senior Bowl, like linebacker, running back, both, because they just don't really do anything in practices that is notable ever. So that didn't really help. And then tested okay. I feel like I remember at the combine if he did do anything, but it's just not really my style personally. But also I don't think he's going to be a 6th rounder.
No, yeah, it's definitely somewhere in between 92 and 220 probably. I'm kind of with you. I'm not a huge fan of Trevin Wallace. I think pedestrians. I think he's fine at what you need from a linebacker, but I think he was fine at Kentucky. I think that might end up being a little bit below what you need in the NFL. So I think he's just a depth piece. So I'd say probably a 4th round area for me would make sense. But JT, have you any familiarity with Trevin Wallace?
I don't.
Okay.
I'm trying to avoid all linebackers in this class. So
I'm sure after those raving reviews we just gave him, you're jumping at the bit to watch him too. So
I mean, he is a Kentucky guy, so there's a Cohen
Liam
connection
Cohen
there.
connection, sure.
So I mean, it might be one of those things where, we brought in Josh Allen, a few years ago, and we asked him, who are you taking with you to the NFL? Who's that guy you want to go to battle with? And he told the Bucs it was Mike Edwards, and the Bucs drafted Mike Edwards. So it might be just one of those like inside connections, like, hey, this guy might not be a premier player, but he's a dog. We got to get him.
Yeah. And rounding out exactly that's draft is Ethan Driscoll, a tackle from Marshall, another Senior Bowl guy, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a big Senior Bowl draft from exactly that. I'm not super familiar with Driscoll. I just know that the Senior Bowl guys, that they were big fans of him. I have not watched him personally, though.
He's huge.
Yeah, I do know. He's like 6'9", right?
Yeah, he's like 6'9", and he's got like 84-inch wingspan.
Crazy.
Something like that. Like, he's giant. Obviously, like Marshall, you're not going to be like a super polished product coming out of college. So there's development room with him there. Would probably be someone that you'd be grooming to take over at right tackle, I guess. Now that Wirfs is playing left tackle.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely like what they have there at right tackle too. Luke Gadecki played hell of a season at right tackle. Yeah. So this would definitely be a depth piece.
A depth, just a depth guy.
100%. But I mean, like we said earlier, traits is what you're looking for in these late round picks. So 6'9", long arms, athletic enough, probably worth it for sure. And they like their Senior Bowl guys. We've said that before. So thank you to exactly that for submitting this mock draft again. We roasted you significantly less than Bucs Report, so congratulations. And then this is the quick little 3-rounder. I'm gonna try and zoom in a bit. Did that zoom in on the screen? Yeah. Sweet. Okay. This is that it 4162. Thank you for your mock draft. First up, this is another one of those things that's super likely for the Bucs is Chop Robinson in the first round.
So Garrett, let me cut you off right there because we've expressed our thoughts of Chop Robinson on this podcast.
Yeah.
Alex, where are you at with Chop Robinson? Because I've seen evaluations all over the place, including your podcast co-host Tyler Forno has him as the 5th overall player in the draft. So where is the reality? Is he second round? Is he the 5th overall? Is he somewhere in the middle? What do you think of this guy?
Yeah, Tyler and I have thought about this frequently. I think that he's more of a second round guy for me. I am not generally a super huge fan of taking like huge projects like he is this early. Like, I wasn't a super big Odafe Owe guy. I wasn't a super big Boye Mafe guy. Like, all of those sorts of like super traitsy pass rushers where it's like they have like 6 career sacks in college. I'm like, cool. Like, like, I think like maybe I'm just a little bit of a safer person in general. But like, I think generally speaking, like if I'm using a first round pick on a player, I'm like, I would rather narrow my range of outcomes a little bit more than that. And like, I'm fine with 5 years down the line being like, okay, he went the pick after us and it was a home run and we only hit a double, right? Like, fine, sure. Because there are like 100 million other universes where like he never turns into anything. And you still hit a double. So he's more of a second round guy for me. I think like for the Bucs, it makes a lot of sense because like, again, like we talked about like the athletic threshold, like that's kind of the mold of pass rusher they seem to like more, just basing it off of like the Joe Tryon pick a couple of years ago. Like, so it makes sense to me from a Tampa perspective. Do I think he's worth the 26th overall pick? Not necessarily, but also if you're like really keyed in on like we should take an edge rusher with the 26th overall pick, I can't think of a lot of like better options other than like Latu sliding down there because his medicals are garbage. But that's not something to rely on. And I think once you get past the first like 3 guys, like Latu, Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, then you get into a very gray area where I'm like, I don't necessarily know that there's one that I like better than Robinson, but I also don't necessarily know that I want to take Robinson in the first round.
Man, you are hitting this on the head, man. Sorry to cut you off. Finish your
No,
thought
you're
there.
fine. That was pretty much all I had.
Okay. Yeah, no, you are amongst friends with that opinion, that's for sure. Yeah, that's kind of why I led my mock draft off with don't think edge rusher, think pass rusher.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're shoehorning yourself into edge rusher, you could get yourself into a lot of trouble, because lot like what you said is if you let him go and he becomes a home run pick, there are so many different factors that could make that home run pick a strikeout on your team.
Right.
There could be an injury. There could just be the coaching doesn't match up with the player. He doesn't understand what's going on. He didn't get the playbook, yada, yada, yada. But I'm with you. I'm second round player. I honestly want nothing to do with him at 26. He scares the hell out of me.
But does feel like a guy who is very likely for what they do and what they look for. But Chop Robinson was so hard for me because I gravitate to those high risk, high reward players. That's the kind of players I like. Like, I like swinging for the fences. But then, you jump into his tape and you watch him and you wonder if he knows that he has arms and how to use them. So,
Ghost moves only, baby.
just full torso action.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm definitely in that same opinion. He's probably going to land in the 40s when my big board's said and done. He's a scary pick because I do think he's a realistic option in play there.
Yep.
And I'm kind of hoping the Bucs have learned from their experience with Joe
and
Tryon-Shoyinka, to kind of
Logan Hall for that matter.
Yeah,
like different positions, but same thought process
for sure.
Like you're coming off a Super Bowl, 32nd pick, swing for the fences. But the Bucs have a lot of holes to fill, and Jason Light's come on record saying they have a lot of needs. This is a pick where I agree. You want to hit more of a double. You want to get a guy who's going to be a 10-year starter, not a guy who's maybe a 2-year in and out of the lineup because he just can't turn into anything.
And real quick, I want to say before anyone's like, oh, they had that same thought process with Kalijah Cansey. Cansey was way better of a prospect.
Never had that process
than Logan Hall or Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. Like, he's a freak athlete, obviously, but
his hand usage was elite.
His hand usage was elite, and he's tiny. Like, completely different thought process there. But
his tape was incredibly good. It was just the question of, do we want to draft a 6 foot, 270-pound defensive tackle? That typically doesn't go well for teams.
Yeah.
And you did it. The tape was good. Everything checked out, and it's worked.
Yeah. And then, I mean, if you want to do it in the second round, cool. Yaya Diaby worked out in the third, right? But the first is where it's a bit scary because the opportunity there is so much greater. But Chop Robinson, cool. Next pick, talked about it with Alex's mock, Christian Haynes. Friggin' love it. Think that's a home run pick there. Has us doubling up at interior and getting center Cedric Van Pran Granger from Georgia.
I'm not against that line of thought where you double up on the interior. I do not hate that approach.
Yeah, I just don't love the pick, the player, personally. I'm not a huge Cedric Van Pran fan. I know you're not either, JT. What about you, Alex?
I have a weird relationship with Cedric Van Pran. I want to like him a lot more.
Yeah.
I just can't quite get there.
Yeah.
And I think that he kind of falls into a dead zone at center for me, where I'm like, if you don't get one of the top 3 guys, I'd much rather just take a Bordolini or Hunter Norzad from Penn State is a guy I really like, or a guy like that in the 4th or the 5th, rather than take a Van Pran or Bo Limmer is getting up there, and I like him a lot more as a 4-5 guy. So round 3 is kind of a no-fly zone for me at center right now, even though I want to like those players. I just can't get there with that sort of valuation on them. I think he's just a little bit more limited than I want him to be.
No, 100%. I absolutely agree with you. And I think like in this area, JT, let me know if you agree here. I would almost rather try and kick Haynes to center and draft like a Cooper BB. I don't know where he's really projected right now, but
I don't know if I want to kick Haynes to center because he's just so good at what he does.
yeah,
But
that's fair.
I might take a guy here like a Dominic Pooney, who I think some people have projected to center.
Yeah.
I might experiment more with that than a Cedric Van Brand.
Yeah, I love Pooney, so I'd be cool with that. And then yeah, that'd be fine. All right, and then rounding out this mock draft, we have someone that JT mocked to the Bucs and Chris Abrams drain. That nickel mold gonna fill in that pretty well.
Was this the PFF simulator? I think if Christian Haynes a B- there.
Yeah.
These
Look,
simulators have been wild.
They gave me a
this
B
year.
for doing that.
Trust, if it wasn't so expensive, there would be the best mock draft simulator known to man, all thanks to a certain group chat.
That's right.
Y'all know who we're talking about, but but yeah, I don't think. Let me double check. How do I? Okay. We are good. That is all the mock drafts we were presented. No more in the chat. All right. Alex, thank you so much for coming on, man. That was a great time. We really appreciate your insight and what you're able to bring to this podcast, and especially from an outside perspective. So before we do our outro, I just want to give you like however long you want to just plug whatever you want.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I had a ton of fun. It's been a long time coming. Basically just go follow me on Twitter. That's the easiest. That's like the only thing I tell people anymore because it's the easiest way to find everything that I'm doing. Because otherwise, it's like I gotta spend like 5 minutes rattling off like 10 different places that I work now. So yeah, just go follow me on Twitter. There's a link tree that's in my Twitter bio. That'll take you everywhere that you need to go. But yeah, I'll be in Detroit live for the draft from Tuesday to Sunday. So if you guys are looking for live coverage from stuff like that, mostly going to be focusing on Chargers and Husky stuff specifically, of course. I think my assignment is instant analysis for all of the Chargers picks and like breaking news for all of the Huskies that get picked. So like 10 to 15 minutes after the Chargers pick a player, and then like right when a Husky gets picked, I'll have an article up on USA Today for both of those. We'll be doing some other stuff as well. I am working on figuring out whether or not I can make a couple like live stream appearances and stuff from either the hotel or the workroom or wherever it is that I end up. But yeah, that's like the main thing that's coming down the pipe. And then I have a lot of stuff planned to like both announcement and like content wise in this summer. So best place to find me is just on Twitter, and I'll announce all of that stuff, and you can follow it all from there. Because even I lose track of everything that's going on at this point, because I'm running out of space in the Twitter bio. I'm running out of space to put all of
need to get a pin tweet or like make like a photo, like a graphic. And
truly. I need like a 2024-25 season graphic of like here's where to find everything, and then that needs to be my new banner instead of the giant crow holding the clock.
Nah, that's great. But yeah, like you said, follow him on Twitter at Alex Katson. That is Alex AlexKatson. He does a lot of great work in a lot of different avenues, and you know, if he'll be live at the draft, might not be super available, but at the end of the day, we're all draft guys, so he'll get his opinion out there for sure. So if you want a really reliable and informative follow for the draft, Alex is your guy. We appreciate y'all watching, tuning in with us for this Mock Draft Mania episode of the Creamsicle Chronicles podcast. May you all have a good weekend and beginning of draft week. Can't wait for it, and can't wait to give y'all some thoughts on the Bucs draft. So until then, have a good one. Thanks for watching, and as always, go Bucs.
Go Bucs.